The Munsters has remained a beloved classic for decades, bringing its spooky yet wholesome humor to audiences across the world. The 1960s sitcom, which followed the lives of a quirky, monster-like family trying to fit into suburban America, was a fan favorite. However, not every episode was shown on TV. While most fans remember The Munsters for its charming blend of comedy and horror, there are episodes that never made it to the screen. There were rumors over the years about a lost episode that was filmed but strangely taken off the air before it could show. Now, after years of speculation, the truth behind this unaired episode has finally been uncovered. Stay tuned as we're diving deep into the mystery of the Munsters episode that never aired and the shocking reason why. The story behind the show. Before The Munsters started on TV in the 1960s, Bob Clampett already had a similar idea. Famous for his work on Looney Tunes, he imagined a cartoon about a family of monsters trying to live in a human world. He worked on the idea for many years, but it never took off until something amazing happened. In the early 1960s, Alan Burns and Chris Hayward, two of the best comedic writers of the century, pitched a similar idea. The pair, well known for their work on Rocky and Bullwinkle, reportedly drew inspiration from Charles Addams's New Yorker cartoons. Compared to other writers who desired to create their characters from scratch, Burns and Hayward chose not to reinvent the wheel. Instead, they turned to Universal Studios. Since Universal Studios already owned the rights to popular monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula, Burns and Hayward saw an opportunity to incorporate these iconic characters into a sitcom, rather than creating entirely new ones. Burns and Hayward envisioned a unique family inspired by classic horror characters: a father resembling Frankenstein's monster, a vampire mother, a werewolf son, and a grandfather reminiscent of an old horror film icon. It was strange, but it worked. According to the screenplay, the family lived in a haunted house-like home in a quiet neighborhood. Despite their efforts to lead normal lives, everyone around them saw them as eerie and unusual. Despite the scary setting and spooky characters, The Munsters captivated audiences in a way no one expected. The show's massive success. With the help of popular sitcom writers Norm Lehman and Ed Haas, this idea was brought to life, and in just a few months, the first episode, Love Thy Monster, was aired to the public, and the results were wonderful. The first season of The Munsters had 38 episodes, which was a lot of work for the writers and actors. That number seems even bigger today, since most streaming shows only have 6 to 14 episodes, and regular TV shows usually have 22 to 24. The show was packed with humor, and its timing couldn't have been better. It premiered just as horror movies were experiencing a major resurgence. Prior to it taking off, Universal Studios had started remaking their old horror movies to fit the current demand, and the audience was falling in love with them all over again. In a way, since this sitcom was backed by Universal Studios, it gave the show a unique look that felt connected to Hollywood's famous horror movies. The studio contributed top-quality effects for the sitcom and brought in legendary makeup artist Bud Westmore to enhance the show's visuals. Westmore ensured that Herman, Grandpa, and the rest of the film cast looked like real monsters, and at the same time, they were flexible enough to make their characters funny. When The Munsters premiered in 1964, most televisions in America were still in black and white. Radio Corporation of America, RCA, developed the first color television system in the late 1940s, and in 1954, National Broadcasting Company, NBC, became the first network to broadcast the Tournament of Roses parade in color nationwide. However, it took years before color televisions became widely accessible to the public. In 1961, Walt Disney moved Walt Disney Presents to NBC, which was owned by RCA and known for airing color programs. With the move, the show was renamed Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. This series introduced audiences to various Disney stories, many of which remain popular today. Its growing success even inspired many viewers to purchase color TVs to experience the full magic of Disney in vibrant detail. As more people began choosing color TVs, black and white became outdated. The creators of the Munsters knew this, which is why they filmed the 1966 movie Munsters Go Home in full color. In the 1960s, many believed audiences had to choose between The Addams Family and The Munsters, as both shows shared similar themes. The Munsters drew inspiration from Charles Addams' New Yorker cartoons and classic Universal monster movies, while The Addams Family was a direct adaptation of Addams' original comics. Even though both shows featured strange families living in a normal world, their distinct styles allowed them to be on TV at the same time. Some people might think that fans of The Addams Family and The Munsters were completely separate, like choosing between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, or Marvel and DC. Butch Patrick, who played Eddie Munster, believed that the two shows helped each other. In an interview on the Australian morning show Studio 10, he explained that The Munsters aired on Thursday nights and The Addams Family on Friday nights, which likely made fans of one show watch the other as well. One thing that sure made The Munsters stand out was the duo that stole the spotlight every time they were on screen: Herman and Grandpa. Herman and Grandpa, played by Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis, were the heart of the show. Before starring in The Munsters, they both appeared in a different sitcom, Car 54, Where Are You?, where they played mismatched police officers. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, and fans loved their dynamic. Off-screen, they also became close friends. In 1964, when auditions for the cast began, producers knew right away who should play Herman and Grandpa. This was the best decision for the producers, as their friendship made the Munster family feel real. Transforming Gwynne into Herman wasn't easy. To achieve the Frankenstein look, he had to wear heavy boots with 4-inch lifts and multiple layers of padding. His costume weighed up to 50 pounds, Bowie 23 kilograms, and the heat from the set made it even more unbearable. At one point, it was said that Gwynne lost 10 pounds, 4.54 kilograms, in a single day of filming. Despite the challenges, Gwynne delivered an outstanding performance. His natural talent and childlike charm transformed Herman into one of the most unforgettable TV characters of all time. The swift changes. When the show initially started, its creators made some surprising adjustments behind the scenes. These included major shakeups in the Munster family itself. When this show first aired, there was a matriarch character, Phoebe, played by Joan Marshall. She looked a lot like Morticia Addams from The Addams Family. The Addams Family show hadn't aired yet, but the producers feared that the audience would mix it up. For this reason, they decided to change the character. Phoebe was replaced by another character, Lily Munster, and this meant that they had to find a new actress. The decision to cast Yvonne DiCarlo in this new role did not sit well with Gwynne or Lewis. It wasn't because they didn't like her, but rather because they weren't sure if DiCarlo could handle the show's type of comedy. But DiCarlo, who was famous for her dramatic roles in The Ten Commandments and other films, proved them wrong. Lily Munster, DiCarlo's character, was a classic 1950s housewife with a gothic twist. Not only did she perform impressively, but DiCarlo's elegance and cool demeanor balanced out Herman's goofy nature. In no time, she became an important figure in the Munster family. Eddie Munster was also an epic figure in the Munster family. In the original Unaired Pilot, Nate "Happy" Derman was the one who played that role. However, this version of Eddie was a troublemaker, and it didn't fit with the show's comedic nature. However, when Butch Patrick stepped in, Eddie became a more lovable character. Though he was mischievous, he wasn't mean. It was much more than a role for Patrick. It was also a huge part of his childhood, and working with Gwynne and Lewis also helped his acting career. Later on, after the show ended, Patrick would talk about those years, remembering how fun it was just to be on set with Gwyn and Lewis. The role of Marilyn Munster was also changed. According to the screenplay, Marilyn must be the only monster who looked typically like a young woman. She never saw her family as strange. To her, they were completely normal. Marilyn's presence in the show gives you something they could relate to. Beverly Owen was the first person to play this role, but for certain reasons, she left the show after 13 episodes. As it turns out, she never wanted the role in the first place. She had been misled into signing a contract, and as time went on, her unhappiness with the situation only grew. Upon discovering the clause that allowed her to terminate her contract, the producers decided to cast someone else for the role. That was when Pat Priest stepped into the picture. It seemed as if the Priest was meant for that show, as it was a perfect fit. Priest did her best to build strong connections with the rest of the cast, and just like all the rest of the Munsters, she became more significant. The props. In addition to the characters, there were other elements that made this show unique. The house was the first element that set this show apart. The Munster house at 1313. Mockingbird Lane wasn't just an ordinary house, it was a character in its own right. With Victorian-era architecture in mind, this house was first created on stage 12 in 1946 for the female lead of the romantic film So Goes My Love. The house was mostly seen in several Universal productions throughout the 1950s. When the Munster TV show was about to air in 1964, it underwent a complete transformation. The third-floor octagon tower, which had a mansard roof and 4 windows, was changed into a covered widow's walk with a tinted roof. A fake gingerbread-style gable was added above the second-floor center window, and a chimney and a crooked vampire bat weather vane were installed. The yard was decorated with bare trees, fallen leaves, and a stone entrance gate to create a spooky look. The house was given a darker paint job and some aging effects before being used for all the outdoor scenes in the series, while indoor scenes were filmed on sound stages. At first, the house's address was supposed to be 43 Mockingbird Lane in Camelot, New Jersey, but it was later changed to 1313 Mockingbird Lane in Mockingbird Heights. The house itself looks like something straight out of a horror film. In a way, it had a charm that made it look like a real home while looking haunted at the same time. The house featured secret passages and hidden rooms that frequently played a role in the story. Herman occasionally crashed through walls by accident, while Grandpa's basement experiments often ended in disaster. The production of The Munsters was just as demanding off-camera as it was on screen. The cast endured lengthy makeup applications, cumbersome costumes, and the intense heat from the studio lights. Fred Gwynne, in particular, faced significant challenges. His bulky boots and heavy padding made even basic movements difficult. Yvonne de Carlo's elegant gowns, though visually stunning, were restrictive and added to the physical strain of filming. One of the most iconic pieces of the Munsters' legacy is the Dragula, a car that looks like it came straight out of a spooky dream. This one-of-a-kind dragster was built from a fiberglass coffin. The idea originated from the 1965 episode Hot Rod Herman, where Grandpa Munster had to design a high-speed racer to win back the family's lost car. Obtaining the coffin posed a challenge. At the time, California law prohibited selling one without a death certificate. To work around this, Richard "Quirky" Corques, who collaborated with designer George Barris, found a funeral home willing to help. Under the cover of night, they discreetly left the coffin outside the back door. No questions asked. After securing the coffin, the rest of the car came together quickly. It featured a 289 cubic inch Ford V8 engine that produced 350 horsepower. The exhaust pipes resembled a church organ. The rear tires were large Firestone racing slicks, and the front wheels were small ones taken from an old buggy. Each hubcap had a silver spider for a spooky touch. The car appeared in Munster Go Home, and over the years, at least 5 versions were built. some now in museums and others in private collections. Off-camera, the cast faced their share of challenges. For instance, Al Lewis, who portrayed Grandpa Munster, ran into an unexpected issue with his prosthetic nose. Originally, the nose was crafted longer than what fans typically recall. However, there was a catch. Every time he drank coffee, the prosthetic would absorb the liquid, lose its shape, and become unmanageable. Eventually, this persistent problem led the makeup team to shorten it for a better fit. The Munsters' perspective. Fans of the Munster appreciated how the show gradually exposed the humorous aspects of monsters attempting to coexist peacefully with their neighbors. One episode that showed what the Munsters was all about was Operation Herman, which aired in 1965. In this episode, Eddie Munster undergoes a tonsillectomy and is recovering in the hospital. His devoted father, Herman, is eager to visit him. However, due to his towering size and Frankenstein-like appearance, sneaking in proves to be a challenge. What follows is classic Munsters comedy. Misunderstandings, silly mishaps, and hospital staff mistaking Herman for a lost patient. But the episode wasn't just about laughs. At one point, Lily suggests that Herman have a serious talk with Eddie, just as parents did in many traditional family sitcoms of the time. She even references Father Knows Best, a show centered around an ideal American family. In his usual goofy manner, Herman responds that such heart-to-heart talks were Donna Reed's specialty on The Donna Reed Show. This small joke speaks volumes about the Munsters' identity. Unlike conventional family sitcoms, it never aimed to portray the perfect all-American household. Instead, it celebrated those who felt like they didn't quite fit in, making it a show for the outsiders, the misfits, and anyone who ever felt a little different. The Munsters was more than just a comedy about a family of classic monsters. It carried a deeper message. Under the humor and physical gags, the show explored themes of acceptance and the idea of embracing differences. Though they looked frightening to others, the Munsters saw themselves as an ordinary, loving family. The real challenge came from the outside world, which didn't always see them the same way. This idea appears in many episodes. For example, in My Fair Munster, a neighbor says that the neighborhood was lovely before the Munsters moved in. Although the comment was meant to be funny, it also pointed to a real problem in the 1960s when many families were treated unfairly for being different. In the episode Munster Masquerade, the idea was taken even further. Marilyn Munster was the only family member who looked normal, and she had a boyfriend. His parents were thrilled to meet her at first, but when they found out her family was full of monsters, they lost interest. The irony was that while Marilyn stood out as the different one in her own family, to the outside world, she was the only normal person. This episode showed how people often judge others based on appearances, and how those judgments can be unfair. A very touching moment in the series happened in the episode Eddie's Nickname. When Eddie felt insecure, Herman sat him down for a talk. His words turned into one of the most memorable speeches on the show. The lesson I want you to learn is that it doesn't matter what you look like, whether you are tall or short, fat or thin, ugly or handsome like your father. You can be black, yellow, or white. It doesn't matter. What matters is the size of your heart and the strength of your character. For a fun sitcom, the scene was a brave moment. It wasn't covered up with jokes or made lighter with humor. It was clear, honest, and connected with viewers. By the end of the first season, The Munsters had become a very popular show. It reached number 18 in the Nielsen ratings, right next to Gilligan's Island. In 1965, it was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best TV Show, which was rare for a comedy with such a unique idea. Years later, it got several TV Land Award nominations for its lasting impact. One award specifically recognized the cast change when Pat Priest replaced Beverly Owen as Marilyn Munster. Even with this big change, the show stayed strong, but no show stays at the top forever. As time went on, critics took notice, and behind the scenes, there were secrets even longtime fans never knew, like an episode that never made it to air. The unaired episode. Before The Munsters became the beloved classic we know today, an early version of the show existed, one that never made it to air. This lost pilot episode, titled My Fair Munster, was filmed in late 1963. It was created as a pitch to sell the show to television networks. One of the most notable aspects of the pilot was that it was filmed in color. While this early version differed from the final series, it helped establish the foundation of the show. So, why did this pilot never make it to air? It was a 16-minute presentation, but was later trimmed to just over 13 minutes. This episode was created to sell the series to CBS and its affiliates. There were some major differences between this test run and the final show. The version of Herman in this pilot looked noticeably different. He lacked the bulky padding that would later give him his signature large frame, and his forehead was even more pronounced. And this early Herman was much more serious, with a somber expression instead of being lovable and goofy. Even the Munster home itself wasn't quite as spooky as we remember. While the exterior was the same, the production team later enhanced it to fit the show's eerie aesthetic, adding a tower deck, Marilyn's balcony, a fresh coat of gloomier paint, and an expanded living room. But perhaps the biggest change was Eddie. In the pilot, he was played as a bratty troublemaker, a stark contrast to the more well-mannered, though still mischievous, Eddie. That shift, along with a few casting tweaks, made a huge difference. Another unexpected element was the theme music. Instead of the now iconic, energetic instrumental rock theme, the pilot used light, cheerful music borrowed from the Doris Day movie, The Thrill of It All. But CBS felt that some things weren't quite right. Joan Marshall's Phoebe looked too much like Morticia Addams, and Nate Happy Derman, who initially played Eddie, was a little too unruly. So, they recast both roles. CBS also requested a black and white format and a stronger focus on humor. These modifications ultimately contributed to the show's widespread success. With those changes in place, CBS officially announced The Munsters on February 18, 1964. A second pilot was filmed, this time in black and white, with Yvonne DiCarlo stepping in as Lily and Butch Patrick taking over as Eddie. Patrick's Eddie had a much more toned-down personality, and his look was tweaked along the way, giving him the now famous widow's peak hairstyle. The black and white format not only reduced costs, but also gave the show a classic horror aesthetic, reminiscent of Universal's iconic monster movies. These adjustments paid off, setting the stage for The Munsters to become one of the most beloved sitcoms of its era. Today, the original unaired pilot is available on the Munsters Season 1 DVD, offering fans a fascinating look at the show's early development, before it became the classic series we have now come to know. The beginning of the end. In the second season of The Munsters, the stories became broader. This may have been an effort to attract more viewers, but the actors felt that the work was less satisfying. In an interview, Al Lewis said that he and Gwyn believed the show was not reaching its full potential. He felt that it could have been funnier and more critical, like in the first season when it openly made fun of the racism and prejudice in that unusual family. Although it was not clearly stated, one might guess that one of the reasons why the show was canceled after the second season was because it had too many ideas and the stories got weaker. Besides that, a new competition was now lurking around the corner, one that captured audiences with a new kind of excitement. Batman was first seen in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. As the comics became more popular, he faced many colorful enemies and even got a sidekick. In Detective Comics number 38, 1940, Robin, wearing his red and green outfit, joined him, creating the famous dynamic duo. By 1966, Batman was still very popular, so producer William Dozier decided to make a live-action, full-color TV show about the character. He believed that making the show silly but acting serious would make it fun for kids and funny for adults. So, in January 1966, ABC introduced a new show, Batman. It had bright colors, exciting action, and fun, over-the-top humor that grabbed people's attention. The show, starring Adam West as Batman and Burt Ward as Robin, first aired on ABC in color. It brought exciting comic book action to television and became a huge hit in 1966. The show's success led to a craze called Batmania, with lots of toys and merchandise. The show's unusual schedule of airing twice a week had a big effect on the Munsters. Batman was shown at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. Each episode ended with a cliffhanger that was finished in the Thursday episode at 7:30 p.m., the same time the Munsters was on. Because more people tuned in on Thursdays to see Batman and Robin escape danger, the Munsters lost viewers. In 2019, Butch Patrick told the Daily Mail that Batman affected the Munsters' ratings. He said that Batman just came in and took our ratings away. The Munsters could not keep up with how popular Batman became during its first season. CBS canceled The Munsters in May 1966, just 5 months after Batman's first season began. The legacy. The Munsters have a lasting impact that goes beyond its run in the 1960s. Over time, spin-offs, movies, and reboots have kept the characters popular, showing that the family's mix of spooky and sweet charm still lives on. One well-known follow-up was The Munsters Today, which aired from 1988 to 1991. This sequel did something different. Instead of picking up right after the original story, it explained that Grandpa accidentally put the family into a deep sleep for 22 years. When they woke up, it was the late 1980s, and they had to get used to a new time. With Lee Merriweather as Lily, Jason Marsden as Eddie, and Howard Morton as Grandpa, the show lasted longer than the original, with 73 episodes. In 1966, the first Munster movie, Munster Go Home, was released as the TV show was ending. It was the first time people saw the family in color, which made their spooky but lovable looks even clearer. In the movie, Herman inherits a British manor and goes on a wild adventure in England with his relatives. The story includes a hidden treasure and even a drag race. The movie kept the same feel as the TV show, with Fred Gwynne, Yvonne DiCarlo, and Al Lewis returning as Herman, Lily, and Grandpa. Several TV movies were made to try to bring the franchise back. One of them, The Munsters' Revenge, 1981, brought back most of the original cast, but it didn't create enough excitement to restart the series. In the 1990s, 2 more TV movies with new actors tried to bring back the old charm, but they did not have a lasting effect. In 2012, NBC made Mockingbird Lane, a darker and more serious version of the series. It was directed by Bryan Singer and starred Jerry O'Connell as Herman. Even with its high-quality production, the show never went beyond the pilot episode. In 2017, there was a plan to set the Munsters in trendy Brooklyn, but the idea was quickly dropped. In 2022, filmmaker Rob Zombie tried to bring back the Munsters with a new movie. His version was different because it used lots of campy humor and a very colorful, over-the-top style. The film starred Jeff Daniel Phillips as Herman, Sherry Moon Zombie as Lily, and Daniel Roebuck as Grandpa. The movie split opinions. Some fans liked its nostalgic feel, while others thought the story was weak. Still, its release on Netflix kept the Munsters in the public eye, showing that the family still has a place in pop culture. TV, music, and movies all show the influence of the Munsters. For example, The Simpsons has honored the show several times, especially in its Treehouse of Horror episodes. The character Eddie Munson in Stranger Things was partly based on Eddie Munster, showing how much the show is part of pop culture. Even the famous theme song has been covered by many artists, proving that it is still well known. Do you think the Munsters would have been just as popular if the original pilot had stayed the same? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fascinating stories.